Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's Dr. Janice Hooker Fortman with Relationship Matters TV. I hope everyone is having a beautifully blessed morning, afternoon, or evening. So, I always get on my soapbox, but I'm not going to get on it but for a minute. All I want to say to you is, there's another variant, and who knows what other variant is coming after that. Wear your mask, even if you don't want to get the vaccine, even if you don't want to get um, a shot, or even if you've gotten two and you've gotten your boosters, please wear your mask. Now, here in Illinois, our governor has come down with COVID. And as you know, our president has come down with COVID. They've both had their vaccines and their boosters, but they're always around people without their mask. This particular variant is extremely contagious. Please wear your mask. I'm off of my soapbox now. Well, I'm excited about today's guest. Because she is going to tell us a whole lot about how to find out about our families, how to write our family stories. Let me tell you a little bit about her before I bring her on. Her name is Ruthanne Warnick, and she is a champion at capturing family stories and experiences, and sharing them across generations to enhance your personal well-being and strengthen your relationships. So we're going to talk, I know all of us have things or stories about our families we don't know. We know that there are stories, and when they pass, when our moms, dads, grandmothers, great-grandmothers pass, and then we start saying, I wish I knew this, I wish I knew that. However, we didn't ask. So let me bring on Ruth Ann. Hi, Ruth Ann.
Hi, Dr. Jan. Thanks for having me.
And I'm glad to see you. I really am. So you're all about capturing the journey. Now, this is what I want to start with. How did you get into this?
Well, quite honestly, about 25 years ago, actually 28 years ago, my father passed away. And it was unexpected in the sense that it took several months, but during those several months, once we knew it was the end, there was no way to capture the stories at that point. So I knew then, but didn't appreciate then, that all these stories went with him. Not only his stories and his parents' stories, but his grandparents' stories. He was first generation to the U.S. And he and his brothers were first generation. And I just realized how much was lost by not capturing those stories. So I started my own personal journey. His brothers were still alive, so I was able to get some of it. But of course, that's through their eyes, not through my father's eyes. And then I realized how much we mean to do it, right? We're going to get around to it someday, and we just never do. And that's the biggest pain point for people that they share with me, that they regret. Like you were just saying, they regret they didn't ask the questions, they didn't get the stories. So that's where it all began for me, was when I had my first, what I'll call, significant loss of someone in my life, in my family. So.
Oh, okay. And I thought about that because my father, why I was interested in what you're talking about, is because my father lived a very colorful life. And he was in the entertainment business. And my grandfather, who I never really, I met, but I never really got a chance to really sit down and talk to him. And he was the first Black entertainment promoter here in the U.S. And so he knew all these different people, that he would bring to Dallas. He was living in Dallas. And so, and I didn't know how many people he actually knew until I ran across an old newspaper article, and it listed all of these different entertainers. And I thought, oh wow, I know he has some stories. And then my father, I'm leading up to a question. And then my father uh, at one time managed Etta James, and he would talk a little bit, but he would say, "Oh, I have so many stories," but we couldn't get him to write the stories down. And even though we asked him, we said, okay, we'll give you a tape recorder and just talk, he wouldn't. So how do you get them while they're still here? He's passed now.
Mhm.
How do you get them to tell the stories, their stories?
It's a great question. And today it's so much easier than the time period you're talking about because there's so much technology now and it's so easy. And quite honestly, the easiest way to do it is to think of it as a conversation instead of making it a formal interview. Okay, Dad, we're going to sit down now and I'm going to get all the stories from your life. If you just have a conversation and you ask a probing, maybe it's not the right word, but a prompting question, you would be surprised how willing people are to talk about it because they're viewing it as a conversation, right? They're answering your question, but in full detail. And then you can ask more questions if you want them to expand on it. So today, I mean, we have a telephone that we could record on. We have Zoom sessions that we could record. We have email that you can just email back and forth and just ask questions, and then you can collect all the answers. So it's so much easier today. And to this point, I would like people to think not in terms of a person's life story, but in
Mhm.
terms of stories from their lifetime. Because each story, while they may be connected and it's all a thread of, threads through their life, it's really different stories, and in those stories can be life lessons. They can be funny. They can be traditions in your family and how they got started. So if we break it down into stories, it's not this monumental like life story that we have to collect.
So not like ancestry, so to speak. Ancestry, I guess, is more like historical stuff rather than it's information rather than, as you say, going back and finding out all kinds of different lifestyles and
Right, right,
like
right.
that.
Yeah, so ancestry, when you're doing family tree, I say that's data, but it doesn't usually have the stories. I mean, the story might be like, for instance, in my family where my grandparents came from Eastern Europe and came to the United States. It's not really a story, it's more just factual information that we have,
Okay.
but it's not the story of what that was like to leave their whole family behind, that sort of thing. So the stories are really sort of they say you have a family tree with branches, right? And the people are the leaves on the branches, but the stories are the flowers and the fruit and all of that. So
Okay. So why do you feel that it's important to have all these family stories and to share the family stories?
So that's where the relationship part comes in. It's a sense of there are a couple of answers to that question. It's a sense of connection and belonging. There have been studies that show that children who know family stories and have had them shared with them and know something about their family history feel more connected and have better self-confidence because they are connected to a family and they feel that. If you're the In between, let's say, the grandchildren or children and the parents, if you have living parents, if you're in between, then you're really the link at that point between the older generation. And so it's almost a responsibility, if you think of it that way, that you have an opportunity, even if someone is already deceased, you still have an opportunity to share your experiences with a parent or a grandparent or whatever stories you do know. So that middle person or generation is the link. And then for the older generation, aside from just knowing that people are even interested in their stories and their life, is an emotionally positive thing for them, right? Because it means someone cares. So it matters to someone, and that their life will continue on through their stories. So I often hear people say, oh, nothing really special. I didn't really do anything special with my life, or, it doesn't, who's interested anyway. But the truth is that we don't appreciate wanting to know those stories until we're much older, right? So our children, our grandchildren, they don't know yet that if we capture and share those stories, that we're creating a gift for them that they don't even know yet that they want. So,
Wow. So, have you tell me some of the stories that I know you help people to
mhm,
capture their
mhm,
stories and capture their family's journey. So,
mhm.
uh, what what are some of the stories that you've heard that kind of you went like, oh my goodness, this is what?
Yeah. So I'll use an example that's actually in our family, but it's not totally about our family. So when my husband was, this is a perfect example of how one story can teach so much, right? So when my husband was young, he was about 10 years old, and he was at a Boy Scout meeting with his dad, and they were introducing all the new scouts. And this was in the 1960s. So it wasn't terribly long after World War II, for example. So we all know what happened, with the Japanese internment camps and all of that. And there was still a lot of sentiment against Japanese Americans at the time. So they were at this meeting, and all the scouts were asked to introduce themselves. And as this one boy introduced himself, the scoutmaster said a really unbelievable thing, that basically that they were not welcome there. He was of Japanese descent, and they were not welcome. So there was complete silence. This is a story that we tell in our family. There was complete silence in the room, except that my father-in-law, so my husband's father, leaned over, and now this boy and his father were humiliated, so they left the meeting. Well, they just left, and my father-in-law leaned over to my son and said, well, if they're not wanted here, then we're going with them. And they got up and left, and they never went back. And we have told that story to our children numerous times. So it not only tells about the character of their grandfather, right? But it also tells about what was going on in history at that time. It also helps them understand where our values, like their parents, as their parents, where our values came from and how we've translated it to them. So a story can just be, it can be something, that's just a silly family story, but it also can be something, much more powerful like that.
Mm. So I'm thinking about my mother and my father really, and when I look back, and I would get some information or their personalities, and it did kind of give me more of a connection, and I think a lot of it, like you said, with that particular story, um, you find out really what kind of person they
Mhm.
were,
Right.
and it translates down to who you are.
Hmm.
So I can see where younger generations would benefit from it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like you said, um, when a younger person asks an older person about their life or some stories about that time that they grew up in or whatever, that older person does feel like, oh wow, that they are interested
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
So now you told me a benefit for younger people, but when it comes to relationships, how does this really translate into relationships?
So in the present, it can create a bond. Now, sometimes there has to be an intentionality about it. So
Okay.
the we'll say the middle generation can take some responsibility for encouraging that younger generation or the children to listen to the story so that they do feel a closer relationship to that person. As an example, I once showed my son, and he was already a teenager by then. I showed him a picture of my mother who was sitting on a chaise lounge at the beach when we were on vacation, and she had hair down to her shoulders, and she was just sitting there. My son said, "What?" Now, of course, he knew her at that point as in her 80s, his grandmother, right? He said to me, and it was like, oh my goodness, exactly. He said, whoa, I never thought of grandma like that. And see, so he never thought of grandma being in her 40s or being a young mom. So then he could develop that sort of relationship that she was his age at one time, ask her questions, and it really connects a bond and relationship, not only in the present, right, for the people who are living now, when I say the present, but
Mhm.
also people who came before. And when you start reminiscing, if you have siblings or cousins, and you start reminiscing about things you remember about someone or things you remember from your childhood or holidays that you spent together, that also it strengthens a relationship because you have those common memories that
Mhm.
other people don't have. So again, it bonds that relationship.
Mm, okay. Okay. So, um, when you're saying reminiscing, and so that's what I'm doing. Why I'm sitting and talking with you, because I think about, there was this one particular, well, at our church, we had a senior citizens program, and and the older ladies, I'm the older lady now, but at that point, my mom and the older women, they were asked to talk about just what they did when they were younger, and I never knew then about my mother loved to dance,
Mm.
and she started talking about when she would go to a party or something, or to a club, and they had something called nickel jelly.
Oh,
And it's like, what the heck is nickel jelly? But that's what they called the I guess how much they had to pay to get in. And
oh,
yeah, right. And I started thinking about that, and I thought, oh wow, so you did that? And because when you look at an older person, or your parents, your grandparents, you look at them like how they are now.
right,
You know
right,
what I'm
right.
saying? Uh-huh.
Exactly.
And you don't relate to them. You relate to them in a certain way.
Right.
But I can see what you're saying. But when you see them and they tell stories about when they were younger, of the things that they said, the things that they did, how they felt, then you can relate to them. And I think this is very important, and especially for younger people, because a lot of times there's a disconnect.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
know, so now, what are the steps? What do you do when someone comes to you and they say to you, okay, I want to capture the journey of my family?
Right,
What do you
right. So it depends on if they're looking to capture a particular, in other words, honor or pay tribute to a specific family member. So I leave that to them, or if they want to tell their story. But I actually have a checklist of themes. So the way I like people to think about their stories is based on themes. So were there transitions in your life that you either challenges or opportunities that you might want to share how you moved through those? Are there traditions in your family? So I provide them with a list, which are really just sort of prompting triggers to say, think about the most important stories or funny stories or life lesson stories, or do you want to focus on family history, like how your family, um, what you know about your past family members? So I really leave it to them. And once we do that, then I can begin the interview process because I know where they want to focus. Because again, we're not doing their whole life story, and it's way beyond where did you go to school. I mean, we get some of that, sure. When were you born? Where did you grow up? But that's just sort of the data. That's the data. So I focus on where they want to focus. If they were in the military, sometimes they want to focus on some military stories. But they don't really know because they have had a full life, however old they are, whether they're 40 or 90, they've had a full life. And so I help them fine tune where they want to focus. So it's not just, on and on. And then I interview them over several sessions. And once I have the transcription from the interview, I can then glean the stories. And then they can provide me with photos and I can put that all together for them. But it's really helping them glean the stories. Now, I will say in an interview, it can go in any direction, right? So sometimes it goes off in another direction, which means that that's a story that they want to tell. So sometimes I have to rein it back in a little bit, but that's really how I develop the stories for them in terms of what stories they want to tell.
So, okay, I'm listening to this. And so how do you get people to even be interested in their family stories?
So if they're not already interested, I try to come from the place of regret, because most people share with me that they regret that they didn't get family stories.
Okay.
So the next step from that is I wouldn't even know where to begin. It doesn't seem like they were that interesting anyway, so then I have the long list of all the reasons. But I like to say to people, if you've lived as a human being, you cannot, well, that's a double negative. I was going to say you cannot not have stories, but you have to have, stories from your life. It's just some people don't think that they're very important or anyone
Okay.
cares. So sometimes I have to do a little bit of mind shifting a little bit for people.
So what you're saying is the person you're interviewing might feel that they really, like you said, aren't interesting or really don't have a story. But if the younger person says, I really want to know about my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what kind of person she was, but she won't open up to me.
Right.
And so what do you do to get, let's say, that grandmother to open up? So do you go from, let's say, I'm trying to put myself into this. Now my grandmother would not open up to me.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but I wanted to know.
Right.
So I wanted to know what she thought, what kind of little girl she was, just what she thought about education, just all kinds of things, and
Mm-hmm.
her experiences around different things. How would you what would you do to get her to open up to you?
So sometimes just the fact that it's not a family member can be, can allow someone to be more comfortable and be, if they see it as like an interview conversation, um, and they won't open up to a family member, or maybe they feel like they might be judged in some way by a family member, so they'll open up to someone else. If they're really hesitant to share, maybe because they just don't think it's that interesting, then that, let's just use you as an example. You could, it's not really guilting them, but basically saying, I'm giving you and the family a gift. We would really like it if you would do this. So it's kind of, most of the time, if someone doesn't want to do it, then they don't want to do it. But what I find is that it's not that they don't want to do it, and it's not that the person, like, let's say, it's not that you don't want to do it, it's that people don't get around to it. That's really the biggest
Okay.
challenge. It's not so much that they don't want, because once people get started, then it's almost like trying to turn the faucet off. So yeah, it's that it's mostly people just don't get around to it is the biggest problem.
Right. And I know people regret, you know, when a loved one has passed, they regret that, I wish I knew more about them. I wish
Right,
I knew more about who they
right.
were. So do you make a scrapbook for them, or CD? What's the finished product?
Right. So I share with them a couple things. First of all, I give them the raw interview so that they can just have that just with no editing. Then I take it and I glean the stories from that, because, when you're talking back and forth, a lot of it is, not necessarily the story part. So I glean
Mhm.
that. And then I ask them to submit photos of the person in the story or the scene or whatever is related to the different stories. I'll take that and then I can create for them that several formats. One is a just a straight PDF, just a document that they can have and they can read on their computer. They also can, I can create that PDF into a flip book. So on their computer, they can read it as a book and turn the pages. And then it can also be made into a hard copy. If you think of like a photo book, but 10 times enhanced because it has the stories in it. My quote is, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then the picture plus the words is priceless. And so that's what I like to say. It's not just the pictures. You've got to have the story, and then once you have the story and you have the picture with it, it's a magical combination. So they end up with several formats: the raw transcript, the raw interview, right? The video, if it usually is Zoom, often the PDF with the photos, a flip book format, and the hard copy format. So they can share it by using it PDF or flip book. See, then it can be shared digitally. It can be shared there. A link can be sent to anyone. But I will tell you that to me, there is nothing like a hard copy written something that you hold in your hands. And that's why I believe in the power of writing letters, writing legacy letters, writing, this is what I want you to know, the important stories, even if it's not in a book, even if it's in a box. I have letters and poems that my mother wrote, a letter that my father wrote to me when I was getting married. And I will tell you, it is magical you can feel that person when you are reading their words. I mean, it's true when you hear them as well, but there's something almost like eternal about the written word. And when I say written, it doesn't have to be handwriting, it could be typed, but I'm just saying you can feel the person when you hold that in your hands. So I'm a strong believer in that. So
I'm I'm chuckling because that means that we're old school.
Yes, yes, but old school. Yes.
Because we like to hold it, the book,
Mhm.
the letter.
But I will tell you, you never have to worry about, except for handwriting, which is why sometimes I also type up things that because younger generations can't read handwriting anymore either. But um, there's, you'll never have the written word go out of, not out of style, but where technology changes, and you used to have CDs, you had cassette tapes, and you had CDs and 8-track tapes, and now you have, thumb drives and you have links. But they change all the time. So now you
Yeah,
have a box of tapes, right? And then now you have to have them digitized. Then you have to, whereas the written word will never go away.
and
So
that's
they're
very, very
all, we should include them all, is what I'm saying. It's not either or, because the
right.
digital world is also a beautiful world. So
Yes, it is, except for when it crashes. So, and then
yes,
that's when you think,
except yes,
what,
yes, when
I
it
should
works.
have written that down. And we have a comment that came in from Gwen Dunbar. She said, I tried this with my aunts, but I
Mhm.
ran into a roadblock trying to get them to open up because they weren't comfortable sharing. But most importantly, there were conflicting points
Ah,
of view.
I see.
So
Okay.
what happens when it's a family and
Mhm.
that you get into that, and not as a family member trying to talk with them, such as Gwen, but when you're talking with them because they want to know about their parents or grandparents and they want to hear stories, but you hear these conflicting stories. What do you do?
Well, if it's an actual conflict, that's a little bit different than if it's just, I don't really remember it that way. This is how I remember it. Then, yes, we all have a lens through which we see the world. We see our childhood. We see our lives. We see other people that we have relationships with. So it's okay to have different points of view, or saying, this is how I remember, or I was actually 5 years older, so it was different for me, that sort of thing. But if there's a real conflict, then that's not really a category that I get into, to be quite honest with you, because that's some family unresolved conflict, and that goes beyond capturing the stories as generational connection. If there are unresolved things, I encourage them to resolve them, but this may not be the format for doing that.
Right. Okay. I understand that. And speaking of writing things down and having things, Sandy Barney, and it says, I have a postcard from my daughter she wrote in camp telling her dad that he took her $2.50 off of her dresser and she wants it there when she was coming home. I cherish that.
Yes, that's the littlest thing, and you have that. It's so many things. First of all, the daughter wrote it, but it's also a snapshot in time. I don't know what age she was, but it say if she was in camp, she was probably pretty young, and so it's a snapshot in time too. So it's a great example. Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And I like to put my comments in, and we talked about writing things down, and Renita Dixon says, I'm the same way. Yes,
Mhm.
love books, write it down. Had a question to come in. Uh, oh, okay. Of your clients, what amazing stories come to mind?
Amazing stories. So some of them are funny. Some of
Okay.
them are more serious. I have heard from people stories about their families from the Holocaust. So
Mhm.
that's, it's very serious, but it's very important for them to have that I'll call it documented, but have it in story form, not just data form, not just like this is what happened, but whatever stories they have. So those are, those kinds are difficult. The most amazing story. Boy, I should be prepared for that, shouldn't I? I'm trying to think of some funny ones. Um,
Well, you know what, Ruth Ann, what I'm going to do is go to a quick commercial,
okay.
and that way, when we come back, you can tell us a real funny one
Okay.
and a real serious one.
We'll do it. We'll do.
Okay, so we'll be right back after just this quick commercial. Don't go away. We are back. If you love those commercials or those promos, we do them in-house with low ski to low pan. So if you're interested in having a promo done for your service or your product, contact me at Jan for now. I'll put it on screen in a minute. Jan for now 125 at gmail.com. Let's get back to Ruth Ann.
So
All
I
right.
was watching those. I'm going to get back to the previous question, but I was watching those commercials, and it did remind me of something that I want to throw in right now, if I could, since that first commercial that you were showing, where there was some tension in the families and in the relationships, and some arguing and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I help clients with and do a workshop on is. Some people call them legacy letters. Some people
Okay.
call them, living eulogies or ethical wills. There are different names for it, but it's
Okay.
a way of writing again. You're writing, putting into words. It can be what you appreciate. It can be wisdom that you're passing down, but it can also be what you honor about a person, what you love about that person, what that person has meant to you in your life. It can go in many different directions, but as long as we're on the topic broadly of relationships during this segment, it's a beautiful way for someone to not only express it, especially if they're not likely to verbalize it, but they can put it in writing. But then the other person can always reflect back to it and say, Oh, I remember, you know, whether they're upset or not, you can just say, let's say you're not feeling a lot of self-love or whatever, you could then take that letter and read it. Or I had written one to my daughter a number of years ago, and I took a picture the other day and I sent it to her again by phone, and she she it brought her back to a place, and she said to me, Mom, you really thought that about me, in a good way. So it was like reminded her how special I thought she was. So
Oh,
again, it's and those are all part of stories, right? Because that's
yeah.
a story that we pass down. So I just wanted to mention that because that particular commercial made me think of
Okay.
how something like that can help mend relationships too. So
Right. Well, before we go on to your amazing stories, Sandy Barney Ennis said, for 50 years, I believed the death of my father was one way. And a couple of weeks ago, a cousin told me something totally different. What am I to believe? And I never told her what I had been told. Wow.
so hmm.
Wow.
So that sounds, I mean, there are ways to research it beyond
Okay.
family story. Um, that's an area that, again, could, without knowing the details of it, could have some wounds and some conflict there. So that would be addressed in a different way. Um, but it sounds like there would be ways for you to confirm the
Yeah.
story. Um, Sometimes we have to be careful what we wish for, though. So that's all I'm going to say. That's what happens with people with DNA searching and stuff too now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to, be careful what you wish for. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that gets into sort of potential family. I'm going to use the word conflict. There may not be a conflict there, like an
Mhm,
emotional conflict. It's just a
mhm,
conflict of information.
mhm.
Yeah, so that would need some sorting out. So.
So tell us um, something when someone was having you to help them with their story, something comedic, something extremely
Comedic.
funny. You had to laugh yourself.
Yeah, so it reminds me so much of so many of my own stories. I have to think, okay, I have to tell somebody else's story. But I might actually just tell this story anyway. We had, and again, it's just an example of these family stories. My father was born April 1st, which is April Fool's Day. And when we were kids, we loved to play jokes on him and all of that. But also, because I'm Jewish, matzo balls and matzo ball chicken soup and all is a big part of our, cuisine, so to speak. And one year we decided, so there's a difference between fluffy matzo balls and hard matzo balls, meaning they're just much denser. And it's kind of like this little debate, of the like, do you like the fluffy ones or do you like the dense ones? And my grandmother always made dense ones. So that's how my father liked them. But, my mother came from fluffy matzo balls. So one year we were all getting together for a holiday, and we took a golf ball. These are the kinds of stories people should tell. We took a golf ball and then we covered it with the matzo ball dough, basically, and then you boil it in water. And we went about our business, and then we served him his soup, and just put the matzo balls right in his bowl, just like normal. And he takes his spoon, and he's trying to. So we said, "Oh, okay, Dad, is that hard enough for you?" And he guffawed. He thought that was the funniest thing. So when we tell that story in our family, for the grandchildren who never met him,
Okay.
that's like a story. I asked my daughter one time, like, how do you connect to grandpa? Because you were so young. And she said, when I hear stories like that, I can picture grandpa laughing. So I'm trying to, I guess, say that stories can just, they can just be funny and silly, but they can also have a powerful connection. And that's what I was referring to before about the relationship. It's a connection, and they have so much power, even when they're just silly like that.
And with a picture, if they've never met, met him with a picture and hearing that story,
Right.
wow,
Yeah.
that would mean they could just really feel him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So, it's just, it's an example. So, we have lots of, funny stories, and not all of them have to have a lesson to them. Some of them are
yeah,
just, well, how did that get started? And you
yeah,
could, I even had somebody recently on, Facebook. She did a whole month series, and people could write to her, and then she would post them. And if you had something from a past family member that got passed down to you that has particular significance to you, or to that person, and somehow you ended up with it, like there's a story behind it, a family story, and people wrote in and wrote in and wrote into her. And every day she would post one, and the stories of how this one thing, this physical, tangible thing, how cherished this one, like maybe it was the one thing they left Europe with, or the one thing, the stories were just remarkable for their families to know that the story behind the thing, right? So
yeah.
another example of the kinds of stories we can tell. So
So do you ever get stories where they talk about a recipe that's handed down and the story behind that particular recipe?
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those are really good ones because again, a recipe is data again, right? You've got the
Yeah,
recipe, but there's the old joke like, why do you cut the ends off the meatloaf before you put it in the pan, right? Because that's how grandma always did it. There's no right because there's no reason really. It's just that's how grandma always did it, kind of thing. So the recipes also get changed through the years. So you can notice like here's the like really terrible, terrible, unhealthy version, with all the butter and the fat and the cream and the whatever. And here's kind of the modern day, version and how it gets altered through the years. But yeah, there are usually lots of stories. The story could be about the recipe. The story could be about memories making the recipe. It could be stories about how we had that recipe at every single Sunday dinner, right? So it can really evoke a lot, hopefully good, but bring back a lot of memories of your experiences and relationship with that person. So there's the recipe, but then there's the memories and the experiences with the person. So there's always a lot of dynamics to a story.
right, right. I was thinking about when we would eat, and my son mentioned this the other day. When we would eat dinner, uh, my mother, you could not drink water um, while you were eating.
Oh,
But you had to drink, if you wanted water or milk or whatever, you had to drink it after you finished eating.
ah,
And my son brought that up the other day uh, because he remembered one time we had all gone out together for Mother's Day, and he said, "I remember when we were all together, and they had the water and juice and whatever on the table, and then somebody was eating, and my mother said, 'No, no, no, stop! You're not supposed to drink anything until you finish eating.'" And they all kind of looked at her and said, "What?" And it's just like a little story, but when we think about it, we laugh.
That's right. So now every time you drink a glass of water at dinner or whatever, right, you think of grandma. Exactly the
Right,
same. It's the same kind of thing, right? My
right,
mother had a song for everything. She would say, "Isn't there a song about that?" And she just knew all the Broadway. She knew everything. So now, that's become like just like the water. That's the thing. Oh, isn't there a song about that? And then
right,
we think of grandma, right? Exactly.
right, right, right. So another question came in. What would be your greatest triumph in helping people capture their journeys?
My greatest triumph would be each one would be a triumph, to be quite honest. They would
Okay.
be so if I've helped someone get around to it and not regret that they didn't get the stories, then that would be a triumph for me,
Okay.
because it's really a family at a time, right? And that's how I look at it. Is it's not about writing a memoir or a biography or publishing a book or becoming something well known. It's each family reaching out and taking the time to make it a priority and important enough to their family to capture that for their generations. So I consider each one a triumph.
Okay, because you don't want to live in that regret. I wish I had. I wish I
Exactly.
had talked to my great grandmother, or wish, and this is a message to young people. Take the time to
Right.
sit down and talk to your grandmother, your great grandmother, your mother, and listen to the stories. So Ruth Ann, if people want to get in contact with you, contact you with you, and you help them capture the journey, their family's journey, where can they reach you?
So if you go to Ruthanne, you can see the spelling of my name there. It's Ruthanne at capturethejourney.com. And there's a way there. First of all, you could download my free 7 no tech, low tech ways to capture stories, family stories starting today. So you could request that. Also, if you have an idea in mind, a project in mind, a milestone event coming up in your family, or there's someone you want to honor and you want to talk about, like capturing stories and what kind of project that could look like for you and your family, there's also a way to reach out to me there that just says contact me, and email me. I'll be happy to set up a call with you and see what you have in mind.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ruth Ann. I appreciate you coming on. And I'm sure some of my audience members will get in contact with you, because, that's it's just so important, because it is a legacy, and we are. So I think I'm going to sit down and think about my story.
So I'll close with this. I will say, don't wait for someday. Just don't wait for someday. That's where the regret comes in. Someday I'm going to get to it, and someday never comes. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you so much, Ruth Ann. It's been a plum pleasing pleasure.
Good.
Uh,
Thank you so much, Dr. Jen. This was fun. This was fun. Thank you so much.
all right, you have a beautiful, blessed rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening.
Yep. Yeah, coming into evening where I am. So, all right.
Okay,
Bye, everybody. Thanks for
all right.
listening.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Well, this was great. Very, very, very interesting. I'm leaving the the way you can reach her, um, at the bottom, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in. And this is, I never thought about uh, the stories. I always thought about it from a historical kind of way, like data, what was happening then, what was, stuff like that. So this has been very interesting. I have a little something here that I want to remind everyone of. Let me show you, because okay, right here. Okay, so if you are available on August 1st from 6 to 10 p.m., a very good friend of mine is having her first event, the inauguration. And if you go to Eventbrite and you look up the inauguration, you can find more information about it. And guess what? They are raffling off a car. I mean, a real car, really. And so just go to Eventbrite, and for $65 to get in, and there are all kinds of giveaways and stuff. Just think you might win the car. Unfortunately, I can't win the car because I'm being a part of it. Maybe I'll send somebody there in my place. Okay, And don't forget my journey, my Queen's journey. I am Miss Senior Illinois. And in September, I am going to compete in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I'll be competing against 45 different women from all across the United States. Send me your prayers, send me your good wishes, send me your luck, whatever it is you'd like to send me, so I can bring that crown back to Illinois. So it's been great. I want to thank you all for coming, and I will see you again next week with a very interesting guest. All right, everybody have a beautiful, blessed rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Bye-bye. We're still here.